Namaste to everybody today. We're glad to have you guys here. I hope you're being blessed. We've been fighting a little bit of a internet issue, and so I'm gonna start out here, and we'll just see how things go. If not, then I will upload another one tomorrow. If something happens, obviously there's something going on. And really amazing, wonderful stuff going on in the world, isn't it, guys? We really are blessed. I have to tell you that. This is the weirdest, hardest, simplest, most difficult, easy thing I've ever done in my life, is all that we're encountering, because it seems like that it just keeps magnifying and amplifying. And so we are on the right path. I will tell you, I firmly believe that that's the truth, even if sometimes we don't have full knowledge of what that path totally is. But we're working on Wednesday nights on Helena Blavatsky's book, which is a very long-term project for us, the Unveiling of Isis. I don't know that maybe some of you understand fully what the Unveiling of Isis is. Isis is the symbol for ancient wisdom, ancient mystical wisdom, the learning and the teaching and all of those things. And it is that is the kind of the symbol of it. Actually, the knowledge comes prior to Egypt, and that's why you see in the Bible they had to write the dialogue, although we found out that the demiurge, the archon, is actually the one who made the statement about I am the only God, not Yahweh, as it got recorded. And that's going to become really big, guys. I'm working on a kind of an extended teaching. There's so much that is tied to us in this modern day in reference to the archons, and for some people it seems to be very difficult. But I do say this to you: the reason that the archons were part of the Gnostic teachings is because it actually is many of the facets that are in the Bible that Yeshua was fighting, and the words that Yeshua said, we are ignorant of it, but he actually is referring to the archons just as others are. Paul is talking when he says that we struggle not against flesh and blood, but about spiritual enemies and spirits and stuff in dark places, in high places. And while it's unknown to us, and they certainly kept us that way, what Paul is actually referring to is the same archons. Paul came out of Judaism into mysticism. And of course, there is a part of Judaism that is mysticism, but he had to leave the doctrinal religion, which is what happens across this world as people awaken. The hold that the archons have on us is starting to break. And just so you know, they're not totally happy about all of this coming out. You say, well, why all the secret and the hidden societies, and why all of these things? Because, dear one, if you go back and research history at all, what you will find out very quickly is that people were killed for what we have the opportunity to see. This was not mainstream, because if you taught it, the Catholic Church would destroy you, and did anyways. I mean, it killed most of the philosophers. It killed all of the Gnostics. So it just is there's really a lot bigger thing going on here than we realize, and unfortunately the archon is part of it. You can see, and as I show these things to you, it's kind of been in my spirit all day. So if I speak a little bit here, hopefully some of you, I won't confuse you, but I actually will set the stage for something greater that will even bring more clarity. But whether you know it or not, there are spirit forces that are controlling. They do not control us necessarily through physical force, but they do control you through mental force. When I shared a month ago when we went through the origins of the earth, and prior to that, when I showed you about the archons, you saw numbers in there, and each of these archons generated a piece to you. Well, what really wasn't clear probably to any of us is that those forces are the forces that work inside of us. They put inside of the human when we were created, they put inside of us anger, they put inside of us jealousy. If you'll remember, they went through a list, 365 things that were put inside of the human when creation occurred through the archons. Many people seem to think that those are aliens, and I don't say that I totally have all the picture between the Anunnaki and the archons. I'm not at all convinced that those two are the same thing, but it's very possible that they are. We just lack understanding because this has all been hidden from us. And so the archons, though, really function, and Helena talked a lot about them. In fact, she is the one that gives the most instruction, and now people everywhere are giving her instruction. And I've heard these things and laughed at them and said they weren't right, but there's a picture, a story that comes to my mind of somebody that I know and love, and they had somebody that they loved for a long time that died, and shortly after, the person wasn't spiritual in that manner. They were religious, but they had never really functioned in the spirit realm. And so they had this loved one that died, and they saw visions in their sleep, I guess it was, maybe it was waking, of the person that they had loved who had passed away. And they said, because you see all of the stuff on TV, you see all the good and all the light and everything's happy and everything. And I have lots of information to share with you that will totally change your perception of all of that stuff. So please listen to this. It actually was taught by the early Gnostics that the only way that there is a created deception and a lie, and that is that you must continue to keep coming in through reincarnation, and every time you come in, you gain enlightenment a little more than the life before you. And it is becoming quite apparent that that is one of the main vehicles that is used to keep us locked in the prison that's called Earth. Now, I just said a lot, but I'm going to promise you I have the proof to back that up. It just is going to take a while to get it all sorted out. So we are in, if you will, a cosmic race wheel. Okay? You go out, you die, you've been told your whole life by everybody that you know that because karma, you weren't good enough, you need to come back in. And so we reincarnate and we go through the same pain and suffering or a different lifetime, and we die, and we're told that we need to reincarnate, that when you die you should go to the light because the light is good. And it's starting now through infinitely higher wisdom that doing that will lock you in the prison of the archons for eternity. That's huge. All of these spirit people that you're hearing talking about the evolution, that's not how the evolution, because the truth of the matter is at many levels we do not at all need to evolve. We simply need to come to the understanding and then the practicality, that is to say, functioning in what we already are, which is consciousness. And so, I just said a mouthful. Yes, if I overwhelmed you, wonderful. If I didn't overwhelm you, then you're either infinitely smarter than I am and you probably don't need to hear me, or you're not alive, because the ramifications of what I just said to you are so overwhelming. So back to the story that I was sharing with you. I've heard this story several years ago, and I never could make sense. So let's make sense of this picture, because it is a conundrum. And if I don't do anything else but what we're doing right now tonight, it's okay. Although what Helena has for us is beautiful, and I've read it multiple times, and it's absolutely amazing. But this is very important. So what happens when someone that you love dies, and instead of seeing the person come back that's smiling and happy, and they're warming you, encouraging you that we're in a good place and everybody's here and we're all waiting for you and it's all happy, and the way that I was told, what they saw was unhappiness. Almost, I got the picture like a scowling face. And that seems to be quite different than many of the things, but I believe that there's a reason why that is also. And in many cases, for you that have been with me, whether you recognize it or not, friends, we're never going to be behind everybody else. We're always going to be out in front of them. So often you will have no one that you can talk to because they don't have a clue about what I'm talking about. And I believe that the conundrum is answered in this question. He went to the light, which is exactly what we are not to do. In fact, we cannot even get back to the pleroma, which is back to the wholeness of the unexplainable, ineffable, all the light, the true light. So there is now a false light that functions after life, and you must go past that. Well, as it all works out, there's actually 6 different levels that we have to pass before we return back to the light, the true light, all. And you have to have answers for those. They actually, the archons will test you at every one of those levels, and if you do not pass it, you do not go. Now, this is ancient knowledge that has been known for thousands of years. It's not new. It's ancient. And it has been known and it has been talked about, but just as we've talked about, the thing with secret societies is that they're secret, and they're secret because people were killed if they exposed the truth. And so unless you were an initiate in a temple associated with the priesthood who possessed the power of the word, you didn't know anything about it. You went on living life, going through karmic cycles, suffering, being drained by the archon only to die and come back in, and suffer and be drained by the archon only to die and come back in and be drained as a... So when you hear people say that you've probably lived thousands of life, that probably is a lot closer to true than you think it is. And so what's really being exposed here is, yet again, as I said, and the intuition and the way Source speaks through me sometimes blows me away. Because I told you, I felt like a week ago or 2 weeks ago that I felt like that there was something that was being hidden from us still. And it's like as soon as I spoke those words, within days, pieces started coming at me. So if you don't understand that we are consciousness and we are creating, it's not you have the chance to if you want to. Whether you like it or whether you don't, you are creating by your thoughts every single day, every single minute. And so it's been said to us, those things that you say will come to pass, and yet we ignore the reality of the truth that has been exposed to us. And yes, maybe there's reasons for that, but one of the most reasons is that we choose just to stay asleep. It's a choice that you make. If I don't wake up, I don't have to be accountable. And I'm telling you something right now, the higher the consciousness, the higher the intelligence, the higher the the higher the mind functions in the search for the all. I'll leave it like that. So I said a lot, but I needed to. I need to help some of you. There are things that that have to be done by us that have been done for literally tens and hundreds of thousands of years. And so I'm going to jump off here and I'm going to jump over because Helena exposes some things that you really need to see. They tie to what we believe reality is, that is to say 6,000 years, and then there's something going to happen. It's all over the Bible. It's all over the Revelation. And some of you will be blown away, friends. The cycle of that is that's all bunk. These cycles are infinitely longer. I'm talking tens and hundreds of thousands of years. And so let me take off and run with this. I hopefully will do more reading than anything, but please do turn your ears on, calm your breath. For those of you who don't know, there is power that we actually have to put in place. A lot of that has to do with breathing, meditation. I'm now finding out about chants that actually have physical power inside of your body. The energy that we must begin to see that's coming from source to us to protect us. Without that light energy pervading every cell of you, you are fair game and open to the archons for them to inject anything. So let me ask this question. What if you never had an original thought in your mind ever, and every one of those thoughts that you've had through the course of your whole life have been seeded in you from the get-go? Because it's the truth. We believe in our subconscious and our low consciousness, we believe that we are doing something. That is part of the delusion. As long as you believe you're free to think whatever you want to think, you'll continue to think whatever they tell you to think. So, as I said, there's weeks and months of stuff that needs to go with this to validate it, but I got to put some of this out there for some of you who maybe don't understand what really is going on. What's so amazing to me is the length of time that this wisdom has been known and how much expense has been put on hiding it from humanity, because the archons do not want you to know what I've just said to you. They love to keep draining you. That's how they get there, is you stay in fear. Why does religion teach fear? Because as long as you follow Christianity, you will always be food for the archons who established religion. Hello. So, I'll stop, because if I don't, I'll be here 2 hours. All right, we left off on page 21. I'm going to jump back to page 21 because I need to read into where we're going. Go with me kind of quickly, because I'm just going to read. I'm going to try not to, and I will stop and maybe say that was important, or did you see that? But I'm going to try to keep it to that. And so we leave off in here about a quarter of the page up on page 21, and I'll just pick up and you can catch me. The unclean one cannot bear the holy prayer is the pious explanation. Moved by pity, some charitable souls administer restoratives to the afflicted ones, and they distribute alms amongst them. Occasionally, a priest is invited to exercise, in which event he either performs the ceremony for the sake of love and charity, or the alluring prospect of a 20-kopeck silver bit, according to his Christian impulses. But these miserable creatures who are mediums, for they prophesy and they see visions sometimes, when the fit is genuine, are never molested because of their misfortune. Why should the clergy persecute them, or people hate and denounce them as damnable witches or wizards? Common sense would tell you, and justice surely suggests, that if any are to be punished, it is certainly not the victims who cannot help themselves, but the demon who is alleged to control their actions. And I want to show you the difference between our society and Christianity and Yeshua. When Yeshua cast the demon out, he did not talk to the man, did he? He talked to the demon, and he forced the demon away from the man, and immediately he began to give love to the human. You could have never had the Salem witch trials without organized religion. It's a piece of the same thing that I'm talking about. Everything that they do is exactly backwards of the love of God. And so, common sense and justice surely suggest that if any are to be punished, it is certainly not the victims who cannot help themselves, but the demon who is alleged to control their actions. Mark in your mind alleged, because not necessarily even real. The worst that happens to the patient is that the priest inundates him or her with holy water and causes the poor creature to catch cold. This failing in efficacy, the kilkacha is left to the will of God and taken care of in love and pity. Superstition, and blind as it is, a faith conducted on such principles certainly deserves some respect and can never be offensive either to man or to true God. Not so with that of the Roman Catholics, and hence it is they, and secondarily the Protestant clergy. Okay? 2/3 of the world. With the exception of some foremost thinkers amongst them, that we purpose questioning in this work, we want to know upon what grounds they base their right to treat Hindu and Chinese spiritualists and Kabbalists in the way they do, denouncing them in company with the infidels, creatures of their own making, as so many convicts sentenced to the inextinguishable fires of hell. And how many times have you had those thoughts if you were a true Christian about mediums and that's devil worship and that's witchcraft, and you hated those people and you didn't want to have nothing to do with them? And so now revelation is coming, and all of a sudden perspective is in the process of changing. Far from us be the thought of the slightest irreverence, let alone blasphemy, towards the divine power which called into being all things, both visible and invisible. Of its majesty and boundless perfection we dare not even think. It is enough for us to know that it exists and that it is all wise. Enough that in common with our fellow creatures we possess a spark of its essence. And that's a very huge part, because there is in us something that does not exist in those that created us, and that is the essence, the spark of divinity that lives inside of a human. The archons do not possess that. That's why, whether you know it or not, you have power that you cannot even imagine inside of yourself, because you have no knowledge of what you are. So we must have a remembering. If we already have been something and we have been forced to forget what we are, and it is a forced, then it's up to us. We must choose to remember. And so, far from us the thought of the slightest irreverence, let alone blasphemy, towards the divine power which called into being all things visible and invisible. Of its majesty and boundless perfection we dare not even think. It is enough for us to know that it exists and that it is all wise. That also is a piece of the perspective of the Gnostics. They did not have any of the concepts of God in their belief system that we have. In fact, they knew him only, if you'll remember one of the key lines from a science fiction movie, "May the force be with you." That is a Gnostic belief system that they used in that movie. That was what our Creator Father was known as, was the Force. We call him the All, we call him the Source, but his name for thousands of years, and see there, I even use masculine even in that. And it is, but it's not in the manner that we use it. Okay. So, enough that in common with our fellow creatures we possess a spark of its essence. The supreme power whom we revere is the boundless and endless one, the grand central spiritual sun, by whose attributes and the visible effect of whose inaudible will we are surrounded. The God of the ancient and the God of the modern seers. His nature can be studied only in the worlds called forth by his mighty fiat. His revelation is traced with his own finger in imperishable figures of universal harmony upon the face of the cosmos. It is the only infallible gospel that we recognize. Speaking of ancient geographers, Plutarch remarks in the Thesis that they crowd into the edges of their maps parts of the world which they do not know about. adding notes in the margin to the effect that beyond this lies nothing but sandy desert full of wild beasts and unapproachable bogs. Do not our theologians and scientists do the same? While the former people the invisible world with either angels or devils, or our philosophers try to persuade their disciples that where there is no matter, there is nothing. How many of our invertebrate skeptics belong, notwithstanding their materialism, to Masonic lodges? The Brothers of the Rosicrucians, mysterious practitioners of the Middle Ages, still live, but in name only. They may shed tears at the grave of their respectable master Hiram Abiff, but vainly will they search for the true locality where the sprig of myrtle will placed. And if you don't understand those doctrines, you wouldn't understand the sprig of myrtle. Understand, it was another in-some metaphor that is used, just like all of this is predicated on. About the beginning, the tree of life, you could, if you would. But vainly will they search for the true the true locality where the sprig of myrtle was placed. The dead letter remains alone. The spirit has fled. And you find that verbiage going on in the Bible, only in reality, it's actually talking about itself. They are like the English or German chorus of the Italian opera who descend in the fourth act of Ernani into the crypt of Charlemagne, singing their conspiracy in a tongue utterly unknown to them. So our modern Knights of the Sacred Arch may descend every night, if they choose, through the 9 arches into the bowels of the earth. They will never discover the sacred delta of Enoch. The Sir Knights in the South Valley and those in the North Valley may try to assure themselves that enlightenment dawns upon their minds, and that as they progress in masonry, the veil of superstition and despotism and tyranny and so on no longer obscures the vision of their minds. But these are all empty words so long as they neglect their mother magic and turn their backs upon its twin sister, spiritualism. Verily, Sir Knights of the Orient, you may leave your stations and sit upon the floor in attitudes of grief with your heads resting upon your hands, for you have cause to bewail and mourn your fate. Since Philippe le Bel destroyed the Knights Templars, not one has appeared to clear up your doubts, notwithstanding all claims to the contrary. Now, I want to say something about the Knights Templar, just so you can have a better understanding. It has been made into it was money, and I'm sure they attained wealth. I'm sure they took lots of wealth from Israel. But what the main purpose for them being sent to Jerusalem was to, by the Catholic Church, to find the ancient wisdom and destroy it. That's why they killed them, because they found it and began to use it instead of giving it to the Catholic Church. And they said, just as with all of the followers of Jesus, we must kill you. And that's exactly what they did. And that's what she's referring to. There are no more Templars. That wisdom has been yet again hidden and is now being brought out. But we went through hundreds of years where that wisdom, for all practical purposes, was lost to humanity. Why? Because the only way that we can contain it is to hide it from those forces that have the ability to kill us. So when you hear about these people who suffered through the Crusades, I assure you, if you will turn your mind on, you will immediately begin to understand they did not go to Israel to do anything except rape Israel of every secret mystic knowledge that they could rape. That's why Source hid the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's why the Nag Hammadi was buried. The only reason any of those texts exist is because they were hidden from the Catholic Church. And so, you may leave your stations and sit upon the floor in attitudes of grief with your heads resting upon your hands. The Sir Knights of the Orient have lost their wisdom and now all that they were based on has just become, just like religion, empty. And so, since Philippe le Bel destroyed the Knights Templar, not one has appeared to clear up your doubts, notwithstanding all claims to the contrary. Truly, you are wanderers from Jerusalem, seeking the lost treasure of the holy place. Do you know what the Holy Grail is? Just so you know, it's not a cup that Christ drank out of, and it's not the Ark of the Covenant. The true Ark of the Covenant is the wisdom. And so, have you found it, she asked, and alas, no, for the holy place is profane, the pillars of wisdom, strength, and beauty are destroyed. Henceforth you must wander in darkness and travel in humility amongst the woods and mountains in search of what? The lost word. Pass on. Now, I'm going to show you, because you might not have any idea about the significance of that, because she's going to use this statement. Just so you know, unless you possess the lost word, when you die and you stand in those plains, unless you possess that word, you cannot hear from the archons, pass on. So we are going to get to a place where you will be totally prepared at that level when you pass to sheer away from the light. There is another way for you to leave, and you will encounter these archons, and you will be questioned and tested. That's how you make it to the pleroma, the light of the true all force. I know maybe some of this sounds really strange to you, friends, but I'm really sad that this stuff is hundreds of thousands of years old, and we're just now hearing it. And most mystics that function under the term of mystics are not looking for truth. They're telling people the same old washed over thing, that you can somehow make yourself better. I don't need to make myself better. I just need to wake up to what I actually am. And there's a difference between those two. And so, henceforth, you must wander in darkness and travel in humility amongst the woods and mountains in search of the lost word. See, that's part of the alchemy. What were they looking for? They were looking for the word that would free them, that keeps them from having to come back into reincarnation and stay in the prison of the archons on this earth. It's huge. You will never find it so long as you limit your journeys to 7 or even 7 times 7, because you are traveling in darkness, and this darkness can only be dispelled by the light of the blazing torch of truth, which alone the right descendants of Ormazd carry. They alone can teach you the true pronunciation of the name revealed to Enoch, Jacob, and Moses. Pass on. That's the term you want to hear spoken to you. Till your RSW shall learn to multiply 333 and strike instead 666. So just so you know, that's another BS thing put in there to make you spend thousands of hours of distraction worried about the 666 and the mark of the beast. Yeah. It's really crazy, friends. And so, the number of the apocalyptic beast. You may just as well observe prudence and act sub rosa. In order to demonstrate that the notions which the ancients entertained about dividing human history into cycles were utterly devoid of a philosophical basis. We will close this chapter by introducing to the reader one of the oldest traditions of antiquity as to the evolution of our planet. Hang on. If you need to get a cup of coffee to wake up, get a cup of coffee, because this is huge, what you're about to hear. It's going to show you why the lie of the Bible about the end of time, why it is nothing but a total concoction and has no basis in reality whatsoever. At the close of each great year, called by Aristotle, according to Censorinus, the greatest, and which consists of 6 stars, our planet is subjected to a thorough physical revolution. Okay? Edgar Casey prophesied that that would be coming in our time. He prophesied that there would be another pole shift in the earth. So you have to know that what she's talking about, part of it has to do 40 years before Edgar Casey's prophecies, another pole shift, and a pole shift happens every time this cycle comes to an end. But not only that, guess what? There have been at least 8 cataclysmic floods that have overcome this earth. So when you talk about the Great Deluge, which one are you talking about? Please hold on. So at the close of each great year, called by Aristotle according to Censorinus, the greatest, which consists of 6 stars, our planet is subjected to a thorough physical revolution. The polar and the equatorial climates gradually exchange places. That's the pole shift. The former moving slowly towards the line, which we have been doing, that is recorded in our government, that the pole is shifting. Moving slowly towards the line and the tropical zone, with its exuberant vegetation and swarming animal life, replacing the forbidding waste of the icy poles. The change of climate, so there is climate change going on, friends. Okay? The change of climate is necessarily attended by cataclysms, earthquakes, and other cosmical throes. Okay? When Casey says there's going to be a pole shift, he told you that all of what she just said is correct. We know that it's happened before at least once. The truth is we're going to find out this thing is much longer term than we have any idea of. As the beds of the oceans are displaced at the end of every decimillennium, and about 1 Neros, a semi-universal deluge like the legendary Noachian flood is brought about. Do you know why there is a flood story in every culture that's ever existed? She just told you why. This year was called the Heliocal by the Greeks. So the Greeks knew this, we don't. But no one outside the sanctuary knew anything certain either as to its duration or particulars. The winter of this year was called the cataclysm or the deluge. The summer, the esperosis. The popular traditions taught that at these alternate seasons, the world was in turn burned and deluged. This is what we learn, at least, from the astronomical fragments of Censorinus and Seneca. So uncertain were the commentators about the length of this year that none except Herodotus and Linus, who assigned to it the former of 10,800 years and the latter 13,984 years, came near the truth. According to the claims of the Babylonian priest, corroborated by Eupolemus, the city of Babylon owes its foundations to those who were saved from the catastrophe of the deluge. They were, dig it, the giants. Now I want to ask you a question. How many of you have read in the Bible that it destroyed all humanity, but you never saw that it destroyed all the giants? Because the next thing you see is there is Og of Bashan, and there are Raphaim that end up all over the Bible after the flood. Why? Because it didn't kill them. And that is actually historically correct, just not used in the right context. So that's why we're finding giants, and the governments are doing all they can do to destroy them, because they do not want you, the archons do not want you to know that this earth has existed and humanity on it for more than 6,000 years. There is something about it that they have been deceiving you, and we believe we're waiting for the apocalypse of the 7th day Sabbath that's going to happen after this final end of the age. All biblical and all bunk. So, According to the claims of the Babylonian priest, corroborated by Eupolemus, the city of Babylon owes its foundation to those who were saved from the catastrophe of the deluge. They were the giants. They built the tower which is noticed in history. Which tower is noticed in history? The Tower of Babel. He wasn't talking about humans that created that. He was talking about giants. These giants were the great astrologers and had received, moreover, from their fathers, the sons of God, every instruction pertaining to secret matters, instructed the priest in their turn, and left in the temples all the records of the periodical cataclysmic that they had witnessed themselves. This is how the high priest came by the knowledge of the great years. And that knowledge that came directly from them is the knowledge that has been hidden and passed down through every one of these cycles. Hello. This is how the high priest came to the knowledge of the great years. When we remember, moreover, that Plato in the Timaeus cites the old Egyptian priest rebuking Solon for his ignorance of the fact that there were several such deluges as the great one of Agis. We can easily ascertain that this belief in the Heliacos was a doctrine held by the initiated priest all over the world. The neuroses, the Vrihaspada, or the periods called yugas or kalpas, are like life's problems to solve. The Sada Yuga and the Buddhistic cycles of chronology would make a mathematician stand aghast at the array of ciphers. The Mahakalpa embraces an untold number of periods far back into the antediluvian ages. So in other words, far back past the flood. Their system comprises a kalpa, or grand period, of 4,320,000 years, which they divide into 4 lesser yugas running as follows. The first, the Sata Yuga, is 1,728,000 years. The Tetra Yuga is 1,296 years. The Kavapa Yuga is 864 years. The Kali Yuga, some of you may have heard the term used, the Kali Yuga, it is a time period, is 432,000 years. Total, 4,320,000 years. So here's the thing. It's not surprising when we come to the end and we start talking about the Neanderthals have existed. They know, science even verifies that the Neanderthals existed at least 300,000 years. There were humans that lived on this earth before us. I'm sorry?
4 trillion.
Okay, 4 trillion.
Yeah.
Okay, my bad. You can tell I've never had $1 trillion. So, which make up one divine age or Mahayug. 71 Mahayugs make 306 trillion? 720,000 years, to which is added a Sandhi, or the time when day and night border on each other, morning and evening twilight, equal to a Satayug, 1,720,000 years, makes a Manwantara of 308,448,000 years. 14 Manwantaras make for the 4,318,000,000, to which must be added a Sandai to begin the Kalpa of 1,728,000 years, making the Kalpa, or grand period, of the 4,320,000,000 years is how long they have ancient knowledge that this earth has existed. As we are now only in the Kali Yuga of the 28th age of the 7th Manwantara of 308,448,000 years, we have yet sufficient time before us to wait before we reach even half of the time allotted to the world. Are you hearing that? You might not need to worry about the end of the world tomorrow. Wow. Friends, what's fixing to happen to you, if you haven't already begun to notice it, is all of a sudden you're going to start knowing things, and your mind is going to start being able to conceive, because what Source is doing on this earth is he is waking people, and when we awaken, our perception changes. He also is going to very kindly bring to us the ancient. I don't know how many of you know, but for 30 years ago, I was reading a scripture out of the Old Testament that said that we are to dig the old paths. We are to search for the ancient paths. Can I tell you today, this is still just part of that same journey. We have been programmed by Christianity for the archons to believe that man's humanity only existed 6,000 years. Do not ask any questions. It's exactly the same thing they did to Jesus. Lived till he was 12 years old and then rebirthed himself at 32 years old. And in between there was nothing. They do it at will. If they want to lie to you, they just lie to you and you buy it. All of us buy it. How we were supposed to be able to trust these people with our souls, right? Well, you can't. Trust no one with your soul except yourself. So, that's even half of the time allotted to the world. These ciphers are not fanciful, but founded upon actual astronomical calculations, as has been demonstrated by S. Davis. Many a scientist, Higgins amongst others, notwithstanding their researches, has been utterly perplexed as to which of these was the secret cycle. Bunsen has demonstrated that the Egyptian priest who made the cyclic notations kept them always in the profoundest mystery. Perhaps their difficulty arose from the fact that the calculations of the ancients applied equally to the spiritual progress of humanity as to the physical progress. So now if we would say to ourselves, well, we are evolving and we are ascending, one of the dead giveaways that we haven't up until this point is that spiritually we are not evolving. In fact, actually, to be quite honest with you, we've been going on the backwards. So you kind of see like when there's in the ocean, how there is an inflow and then there's an outflow. We're on an outflow that's fixing to take a big inflow. And we will watch the change in consciousness and the change of, it's already going on and it's happening all over the world, all at the same time. And so, there hasn't been the spiritual progress of humanity as to the physical. It will not be difficult to understand the close correspondence drawn by the ancient between the cycles of nature and of mankind. If we keep in mind their belief in the constant and all-potent influences of the planets upon the fortunes of humanity, Higgins justly believed that the cycle of the Indian system, 432,000 years, is the true key of the secret cycle. But his failure in trying to decipher it was made apparent, for as it pertained to the mystery of the creation, this cycle was the most inviolable of all. It was repeated in symbolic figures only in the Chaldean book of Numbers, the origin of which, if not extant, is certainly not to be found in libraries, as it formed one of the most ancient books of Hermes Trismegistus, the number of which is at present undetermined. Calculating by the secret period of the great Neros and the Hindus' Kalpas, some Kabbalists, mathematicians, and archaeologists who knew nothing of the secret computations made the above number of 21,000 years to be 24,000 years for the length of the great year, as it was to the renewal only of our globe that they thought the last period of 6,000 years applied. Higgins gives as a reason for it that it was anciently thought that the equinoxes preceded only after the rate of 2,000, not 2,160 years in a sign. For thus it would allow for the length of the great year 4 times 6,000 or 24,000 years. Hence, he says, might arise this immensely lengthened cycles, because it would be the same with this great year as with the common year, till it traveled round an immensely lengthened circle when it would come to the old point again. He therefore accounts for the 24,000 in the following manner. If the angle which the plane of the ecliptic makes with the plane of the equator had decreased gradually and regularly, as it was till very lately supposed to do, the two planes would have coincided in about 10 ages, or 6,000 years. In 10 ages, 6,000 years more. The sun would have been situated relatively to the southern hemisphere as he is now to the northern. In 10 ages, 6,000 years more. The two planes would coincide again, and in the 10 ages of 6,000 years more, he would be situated as he is now, after a lapse of about 24 or 25,000 years in all. When the sun arrived at the equator, the 10 ages or 6,000 years would end and the world would be destroyed by fire. Does anybody remember the prophecies in the book of Revelation about the world and the fire and the destroy and hell? Now you know where that lie comes from. So, in reality, if you believe that, then what we're sitting here today doing is we all have had smoke blown up a special place. And the reality of what's coming for us, friends, is we're all going to die because we're all going to burn. They didn't tell you that part, did they, in Sunday school? Why? Because I don't know one person besides myself, other than now all of y'all can be added, that even know this. Wow, that's where the 6,000 years comes from. That's why 6,000 years is the number we fear, because that's when judgment's coming. What is judgment? Judgment is the judgment by fire. And it actually calls it that. Hence, he says, might arise their immensely lengthened cycles, because it would be the same with this great year as with the common year. 24,000 years. Let me jump down here again. It's crazy. All right. So, when the sun arrived at the equator, the 10 ages of 6,000 years would end and the world would be destroyed by fire. When he arrived at the southern point, it would be destroyed by water. So now the prophecy and the reality, according to their wrong math, is that every 6,000 years, there's supposed to be a flood, and every 6,000 years after that, there will be a fire. And every 6,000 years after that will be a flood, and every 6,000 years after that will be a fire. And earth, every 6,000 years, is totally decimated and restarted all over again. So these modern people who do not have the ancient wisdom that Helena Blavatsky spent her lifetime chasing all over the world. And thus it would be destroyed at the end of every 6,000 years, or 10 neurosis. This method of calculating by the neurosis without allowing any consideration for the secrecy in which the ancient philosophers, who were exclusively of the sacerdotal order, held their knowledge, gave rise to the greatest errors. It led the Jews, as well as some of the Christian Platonists, to maintain that the world would be destroyed at the end of 6,000 years. Gale shows how firmly this belief was rooted in the Jews. It has also led modern scientists to discredit entirely the hypothesis of the ancients. It was given rise to the formation of different religious sects which, like the Adventists of our century, are always living in the expectation of the approaching destruction of the world. Anybody, could I get an amen? As our planet revolves once each year around the sun, and at the same time turns once in every 24 hours upon its own axis, thus traversing minor circles within a larger one, so is the work of the smaller cyclic periods accomplished and recommenced within the great Saros. The revolution of the physical world, according to the ancient doctrine, is attended by a like revolution of the world of intellect. So you see something here. You see that it's not one or the other. That the spiritual part of this component of material matter is as much a part of material matter as it is spiritual matter. And so the spiritual evolution of the world proceeding in cycles like the physical one. So maybe you've heard some people like Dolores Cannon, Edgar Casey talk about that we're coming into a time of consciousness evolution, and really it's not. I'm going to share a piece here which is quite important with you. And one of those pieces is we're being told that somehow, so please listen if you struggled at all with this. We have been told that somehow we must raise our frequency. And I keep looking inside myself wondering, how is my frequency raising? And maybe some of you have encountered the same thought processes. I want to share with you a word of love and kindness today. It's not our frequency that is the problem. It's our awakening to what we are. See, what we don't understand is, and if we did, then it would become sacred, and we might do something to protect it. Okay? I shared with you that your frequency is sacred. How you vibrate means everything. The problem is that we're not broken because we're consciousness. It's hidden because we've been asleep. So when you find out that you are something and you begin to believe that inside of you, you begin to transmute, which is what alchemy talked about. You will transmute into that thing. So that means change from one form to another form. So what we are doing is transforming from one form, which is a human having a spiritual experience, to a spirit that is only having to deal with humanity until we begin to awaken. So the remembering that, maybe you've watched some videos and you hear a lot of people talking today about the remembering. The more that we remember what we have been in the past for countless eons, the more we will become what we already are. I want you to stop and just pause and think about that for a second. What if it wasn't that you had to do some laborious thing? Now, I'm not throwing away. We should. I have a new chant that Helena said was the most powerful tool that you could use, and it is an ancient chant, but it's not the way that we were taught in America. You were told that all of the ancients sat with their hands and their legs in a lotus, and that they put their fingers together, which is a mudra, and that they said, Om, 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 and you laughed about it and sneered about it. Those are the statements that Yeshua was talking about that I read to you on Saturday. Those who sneer and laugh about things they have no knowledge of. One of the most powerful things, vibrationary and frequency-wise, you can do is the ancient AUM. Just suffice to say, AUM is absolutely something that should be part of your everyday life. And so you say, well, what does that mean? I ain't telling you. So I've said enough tonight. We made our time. I know I've thrown a lot, as I always do out there. I'm not sorrowful, because I am being what I'm told that I'm to be. And it is going to have a time, but I also want people I want you to understand that we are living in one of the greatest, we truly are in a matrix, but it's infinitely larger. You know, I know for some of you, you might have had the thought process along the lines when I said that you've never had an original thought in your life. And some of you probably let your pride and ego jump up and all of a sudden ain't nobody telling me what to do. Well, what if, dear friend, the sheer fact that you said that is proof that someone's telling you what to do? Do you realize that half of your life could be accounted to manipulation by the archons at minimum? So what you've been doing is walking around and dancing in front of the archons their dance while they drain your energy and find great mirth in your stupidity. You don't even know, and you don't even care to know. And they're just going to keep draining you as long as you will allow it. But the problem is once you begin to enlighten, they can't grab you. They can't hold you. Helena's journey in battle, dear friends, was to find the path for the archons not to destroy her. And the stories that I will share with you and you can read for yourself are amazing of the things that the spirit forces put against this woman for the truth that I'm trying to share with you. So I hope that you've enjoyed, because I do hope that you find mirth. I do hope that you find joy in finding out the truth about things, that we have been deceived in 6,000 years in the end of the age. And that, see, first off, when Yeshua says the end of the eon, we'll go back and we'll look, but an eon is not 6,000 years in the first place. An eon is a totally different creature. And he said it. It's in the Bible. You were told what it means. And all of that, what he told you, was a lie. So we're going to pick up here on page 25 next week. I kind of hope, because there's really, as big as that stuff was, there's much more that goes with it. And that's why I said, I don't think for you that are really hungry and may not have the time, maybe it's too much to read and decipher. I spend a lot of time in meditation, prayer, and constant contemplation about these things that I share with you. We're not here accidentally. We're not in the wrong place. We're in exactly the right place. And if you want to know about a picture of his love for us, it comes from the fact that he's, at the same time he's exposing truth to us, he is also protecting us from all of the falseness that lives out there under the title of spiritualism. If you follow that crap, it has all been established. Most of it all has been established by the archons to once again lead you away from the truth. And we thought we were doing something. So I hope that you will be encouraged. Nothing is lost. You don't have to try to be something. You just have to accept and begin the journey towards what you already are. And with that, I say this evening, shalom to each and every one of you, and namaste.